Hello, and this is a recording of my talk on Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 6. Now, look at the moment like that's what I'm talking about. Looks like I got a cat in a football game. Well, this is indeed what it is. I'm recording this on January 9th, day for the 2022 National Championship between Alabama and Georgia. And this is my cat, Freddie. Freddie is very much of a great spectator of Alabama games. He's an Alabama fan. Matter of fact, Freddie has not seen Alabama lose a game. And this is him watching the SEC Championship, our first experience with Georgia. It was a victory. And here you see him last year watching last year's Georgia game. And here is a game he was watching year before, Arkansas. See that he's very intent. And I hope Freddie will come up and watch the game with me tomorrow and that we have good results. And maybe I should have waited to record this until Monday. But we will see. All I can say is roll tide and onward to Purgatorio, Canto 6. The loser, when a game of dice is done, remains behind reviewing every roll, sadly and sadly wiser, alone. The crowd leaves him with the winner. One behind tugs at him, one ahead, one at his side, all calling their long loyalty to his mind. Not stopping, he hands out a coin or two. Those he has rewarded let him be. So he fights off the crowd and pushes through. Such was I then, turning my face now here, now there, along the route, and promising on every hand that I fought clear. There was Armatine who came to woe, to Murrah's hand of Taco. And there, the other who drowned while he was hunting down his foe. Their hands outstretched to me as I pushed through was Rico Novello and the Plesian who made good Marzucchio shine so true. I saw Count Orso in the shade of one, torn from its flesh, it said, by hate and envy, not for any evil it had done. And we have continuation of Canto 5. We have this crowd of souls who died violently, really interested in Dante because they figured out that he can pray for them or other people to pray for them so they can get the grace, shall we say, the energy to move on and move into purgatory proper. So they're surrounding him like the metaphor Dante gives, like people surround a dice game. And Pierre del Brosa, I mean, this word made the lady of Verbat take heed while here, lest there she finds herself a worse bird. We have all these people. But first, let's just mention a little bit about the dice game. For information on the game of Zara, Arabic Zara, you can see this particular guy, Singleton's boss, okay? Anyway, similar to modern game of craps, Zara involved betting on the numbers from 3 to 18, resulting from the cast of 3 die. Numbers 3, 4, 17, and 18 were like 2 and 12 in the modern game, an undesirable result, unless the player called them out before he threw the dice. The game was apparently played by 2 players, as reflected by Dante's reference to only a single loser in this passage. Verse 8, the reference is to reward a winner traditionally bestows upon the onlookers a bit of his winnings. Practice found today in those gambling tables. Tip the croupier, make your gambling happy. This is from Hollywood. Now here is the commentary from Spiritual lessons from Dante. An extended metaphor, Dante compares the reaction the souls had when they saw his shadow to the way people gather around the big winner in a game. The man, loaded down with his winnings, finds that he has, all of a sudden, many new friends. Friends want to share his fortune. How does this apply to Dante? Certainly, the souls are flocking to him. The similarity goes deeper than that. These souls can only shorten their appointed time in this part of purgatory by the prayers, good works of those who are still living. Dante is considered a big winner by these souls, not because of material wealth, because he has a spiritual good fortune to be able to do good works and pray, simply because he is still alive. St. Philip Neri would often say to young people you meet, happy you were young who had the chance to do good. How lucky Dante must seem since he's able to do these things for himself and for others rather than have to depend upon the charity of others who might not even know him. Dante is able to break free of them not by sharing some of the money he had won, as in the metaphor, but by promising to share his spiritual goods, by praying for them, asking prayers of others, and with my promises to pass time. When we know what life is, particularly difficult and dangerous, that is precisely the time that we should get spiritual matters in order. Men dying of terminal cancer should know they go well and receive the sacrament. It becomes an act of procrastination or negligence, not to put first things first, especially at a time like that. Life is as certain as that. You need to be ready at all times. Since life is never entirely certain, perhaps that is a good advice for all Christians, not merely those living in violent parts of the world. We have been divinely warned to be prepared for judgment. Failing to be ready is therefore a serious offense. Second, at least some portion of this group of people have willfully entered into violence, of which they died. Some of them died in battles they themselves instigated. Some died in fights or good they could have avoided. They went into these self-imposed dangers without settling matters with God first. This group seems doubly responsible. Now, we can talk about some of the people mentioned in this group. And this is from Hollander. And we got Count Orsio. Was murdered by his cousin, Count Alberto de Mangona. Respected fathers Napoleoni and Alessandro degli Alberti de Mangona have been seen locked in eternal hatred in Cana. His treacherous to begin in Inferno 32. You may want to look back at that. The family there. So like father, like cousin. Only non-Italian in this group. The first of them to die in 1278 was a Frenchman, Pierre de la Rose, was chamberlain to the French King Philip III. Pierre, in 1276, made charges against the Queen Mary of Bourbon, having poisoned the heir to the throne, Philip's son by the former Queen Isabel of Aragon. That's a gutsy move, is it not? Within 2 years, not only lost his place as favorite king most brutally death before the assembled nobles. The cause of his shame and death seemed to have been, in Dante's mind, the nefarious behavior of the queen, perhaps accusing him wrongly of an attempt upon chastity. Dante seems to have believed a common version of the story which would put Mary Bourbon, Marquet, a province of Belgium, not in purgatory, her victim as his victory, but in hell, probably in the last amount of Mojo, along with Potiphar's wife. If she failed to repent her evil deed, since she lived almost as long as Dante, she died in, say, year 1321. One wonders if she'd been aware of this warning. Yeah, Dante, once again, puts some living people in his book. It should also be remembered that Mary's son did, in fact, become king of France. Dante allowed his father's salvation. Okay, we'll see Philip III old Purgatory. But we see him lamenting the reign of his very son, Philip the Fair, referred to as the Plague of France in the next canto. He was a plague of France. We won't go into everything. He was a strong king and successful in a humanistic, secular way, but he was not, not a very pleasant person or a very moral person at all. And did damage to the church along with all that. So now we continue with the canto. I won my way free of that press of shades, whose one prayer was, that others pray, so advance them towards their blessedness. I said, "O my soul's light," she's referred to Virgil, "seems to me one of your verses most expressly states, prayer may not alter heaven's fixed decree. Yet all these souls pray only for a prayer. Can all their hope be vain, or have I missed their true intent, read some other there?" And as we'll see in a moment, he's referring to something Virgil wrote in Need and saying, well, what about that? He said prayer doesn't alter heaven's decree, but these folks sure think so. So what's up with that? And he said, the sense of what I wrote is plain if you will bring all your wits to bear upon it. Nor is the hope of all these spirits vain. Virgil's getting a little ticked here, I think. And also, sometimes when you say a sense of what I wrote is plain, sometimes that means the exact opposite. Towering crag of justice is not bent, nor is the rigor of its edict softened because the supplications of fervent and pure in heart cancel the debt of time, decreed on all those souls who linger here, consumed with yearning to begin to climb. In other words, prayer tends to lessen their debt. We can think more positive way that helps, say, fuel them with grace. The souls that roll about are in that place where sin is not atoned for, their prayers, they being pagan, cut off from grace. It says, well, heck all. First of all, I was talking about hell to begin with, and hell and prayer do not go together. Besides, hey, it's pagan. What do you expect? Save all your questions of such consequence till you meet her who will become your lamp between the truth and your intelligence. Do you understand me? I mean Beatrice. She will appear above here, the summit of this same mountain, smiling in her bliss. So he sort of kind of puts the whole thing, eventually just talk. Here is Hollander's speech, which says some of the things we already said. Dante's leading question is Virgil on the spot. And indeed, the soul answers Apollonius's quest of Aeneas that he have his unburied corpse laid to rest by denying him such a hope. Cease hoping that decrees of the gods turned aside by prayer. Does this answer compel us to believe that the penitents are deluded in hope, efficacy of prayer? Dante's question is necessarily a tricky one for Virgil to have to deal with. Virgil, having failed to develop a convincing case for his own expertise, now turns to Beatrice's authority. Now, we continue, and Dante is talking. My lord, I said, let us go faster now. I find the climb less tiring than at first. See, the slope already throws a shadow. Day leads on, he says. We shall press as far as we yet may while the light holds. The ascent is harder, yes. Before it ends, the sun must come around to its present hiding place behind the mountain, and once more cast your shadow on the ground. See that spirit station all alone, looking down at us? Who will point out the best road for us as we travel on? The figure was shortly revealing himself to be Sordello, 13th century Italian poet who wrote the Provençal. And you can read all about Sordello. I'm not going to go through all the details. He had quite an adventuresome life, mostly in Provence, which is now part of France, and he wrote some poetry that Dante admired, particularly some political poetry like that. Of course, he's going to be concerned about politics in this canto. So Sordello is something of a guide or semi-guide, companion, just to emphasize that. So, in any event, that's who we're going to be talking to, Sordello. Climbed on then. Oh, Lombard, so serene, how nobly, deliberately watched us. Talking about Sordello, who's a Lombard. How distant and majestic was your mien. Did not speak to us as on the crest, on us fixed his unblinking eyes as if for a lion dressed. Virgil, who blessed, climbed to his side and begged him to point out the necessary. Shade ignored the question and replied, asking what country we were born and who we were. Jungle guide began, Mantua. That shade, till then withdrawn, leaped to his feet, like one in sudden haste, crying, "O Mantuan, I am Sordello of your own country." The two embraced. So basically, these two are from the same country. Remember, I'll mention again that Italy as a country did not exist at this time. Really, Italy as a country didn't exist until the middle 19th century. All these little uh, city-states and pieces of Italy being controlled by other powers, Austria, France, Aragon, Spain, what have you. And so Sordello is figuring out that Virgil is his fellow countryman since he's from the same little city-state town of Mantua. Purgatory 6 is a canto of Italy, as Inferno 6 is a canto of Florence, and Paradise 6 is a canto of Empire. And we'll see again and again, this is what happens. Each canto of three divisions, Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise, are connected to each other. There are connections, some obvious, some not as obvious. And here's one. Purgatory 6, Inferno 6, and Paradise 6 talk about politics. The symmetry should not delude us. The concept of Italy is much murkier than Dante's contemporaries, as I just mentioned, much further from the modern concept than that of Florence and that of the Holy Roman Empire. Italy did not exist for Dante as a country or whatever. Florence did, and so did the Holy Roman Empire. The idea of Italy is in great part linguistic. This linguistic treatise, Dante describes Italians are those who say "si" as an affirmative adverb, breaking this lingua da si down various regional subgroups. All right. Moved from language to politics, Italy is also, for Dante, a place of basic tyranny, and analysis of tyranny in Purgatory 6 should be connected to other canti where the term is present. Inferno 12 and Inferno 27. Purgatory 6 begins with Dante surrounded by a pressing crowd of souls who die violently, eager to speak with him, some of whose names were briefly indicated by the poet. One of those that's indicated by this is the son of Marzucco Scorzenia, Giano, died at the hands of Ugolino. Assassins, thus Giano of Purgatory 6 is embroiled in the feud between Ugolino and his grandson Nino Visconti, died at the hands of a tyrant, just as Jacopo and Pesaro in Purgatory 5. Don't you just love these names? Love them more if I could speak Italian. The embrace between Virgil and Sordello is compared by the poet to the current state of Italy, whose citizens do not embrace each other, rather gnaw at each other. Metaphorical use of dera echoes Ugolino episode of Inferno, 32-33, which you may remember, where we had two people actually one gnawing the other for eternity. And one Pisan literally gnawing on the skull of another Pisan. Given the present was Canto of Gano, who was related and assassinated on behalf of Ugolino, the guy who's in there being gnawed. 7, that for Dante, Ugolino is a character who assumes emblematic value far beyond his own zone of hell. Ugolino is emblematic of the tragedy of Tarmania, family factionalism that are destroying Italy. And let it be a warning to us. Immediately after the embrace of Sordello and Virgil, something quite remarkable happened, which has never occurred for such a long stretch in the poem. Dante interrupts his diegesis in narrative line as he had passed briefly for an addressed reader, but on this occasion does so for the remainder of Purgatory 6. So we're going to have a digression here. Towards the end of the canto, it describes what he's doing as a digression, calling attention to the interruption of Purgatory 6 and giving the interruption its liturgical label. Dante confers enormous dignity on this singular event. Interruption or break in the narrative is emblematic. The rupture or break, comity, civility, that is the tragic fate of Italy. Digression is an explosion of political anxiety about the state of so-called Italy. After this apostasy in Italy, Dante, poet, apostrophes from other major actors in the tragedy of Italy. He sees it. Clergy, who are meddling in politics, he shouldn't. The emperor, who's just basically not meddling as he should be meddling. And he then calls on the emperor to come from Germany, Italy, to see the devastation wrought by his political negligence. His desperation, Dante turns to God himself and asks for the liturgical culmination of digression. If God had forgotten Italy, finally he turns to my Florence and sarcastically attacks his natal city. In analyzing his explosive digression on abject Italy, it is important to trace the poet's strong rhetoric, especially the turbulent sequence of his apostrophes and string of metaphors that designate Italy. Now you notice that Dante mentions Justinian. What does it matter that Justinian came to trim the bit? No one sits in the saddle. Now again, you would have less cause for shame. Well, Justinian's going to turn out to be a rather important character in Dante's comedy, at least from several points. We're going to meet him in heaven, and he's going to be the one character who will have an entire canto to talk. And you're going to say, what the heck is he going to talk about? Who the heck is this guy? So we're going to have a brief look at him now, and we'll meet him later, and we'll see him mentioned, I think, time to time in the Divine Comedy. Well, Justinian was a Roman emperor, Eastern Roman emperor. He was born in 482, died in the year 565. But he became emperor just a few decades after the collapse of the Western Empire, something that many people, and I think erroneously, say it was the end of the Roman Empire. It was the end of the Western Empire, Eastern Empire, but it did just fine. As a matter of fact, when he became emperor at 527, this is what Justinian had. He had the entire eastern half that was still intact. What happened was, after Diocletian, the 3rd century, the empire tended to be divided into two parts, with the western half having its own emperor as to the east, and they cooperate and work. But just the idea being the empire had so many troubles and was so vast, you really needed two guys to sort of keep things going. Well, as I said, that the last Western emperor was deposed in 476. Justinian came to power 527. He decided that he was going to do something about the fact that the Western part was lost, and he did. He took his General Belisarius and other General Narcissus commission, and they retook North Africa, Italy, Laricum, which is now coast of Croatia, so we say, and even in part of Spain. They retook it, and he probably would have perhaps done even more, but he really overextended the empire, and fortunately a plague broke out, and the Persians over here became more aggressive, so really stopped the restoration. But Justinian, this political situation, you can see what he did. He reunited Italy to the imperial situation. And one of the things we have here is we have the church of San Vita in Ravenna, which has mosaics dating back to the 6th century when Justinian took over this church, and we have some beautiful mosaics. And right at the aspect, at the altar, where the altar would be, you have a mosaic portrait of Justinian and his court. You can see, obviously, visited here. You can see, as I said, his court. Here's Justinian, and here is his court. This is over here is probably Belisarius, his great general, and this is probably the Archbishop or Patriarch of Constantinople. And you can also see church here in Ravenna is filled with these brilliant mosaics. And Ravenna, for next 2 centuries or so, would serve as the capital of Eastern Roman Empire's administration. Italy, Eastern Roman Empire is often referred to as the Byzantine Empire. Perhaps that's not entirely correct, because there is a continuity to this empire, and certainly the leaders in Constantinople, which was its capital, considered themselves to be the continuity of the Roman Empire. Now, look at the opposite side here. Look to the right instead of the left. You also see a mosaic, and this is of his wife, Theodora, in her court. Theodora was a rather important figure. In fact, possibly there had been no rule of Justinian without Theodora, since early in his reign there was a riots. Justinian was getting ready to hightail it out of Constantinople, but Theodora said, "No way, you're staying here." And the riots were suppressed, and he became his emperor. Now, I mentioned his retaking of territory. As far as Dante is concerned, the most important thing he did was something called the Justinian Code, which was written by going through all the Roman law tablets and basically removing the contradictions, codifying, cleaning it up. And starting in the High Middle Ages, this became the basis of a revived study of the law. And one of the centers for this was Bologna. This is a handout or guide to an exhibition at the Frisk Art Center. And if you're listening to this before January 31st, 2022, you still have a chance to go see this exhibit. It's well known to see. And what it basically has is various manuscripts that were written at the time of Bologna. Bologna became a university town, one of the early universities. This one specialized in law. And you had all these beautiful manuscripts that were written. This one is basically about some of Justinian's writings and has illustrations. Illustration is the soldier's will being written. There's a soldier and this is a scribe. You have Justinian sort of listening, but here he has his Justinian code. And the Justinian code, as I said, became important in medieval Europe, but also continues to be important. It's really the basis of Western law, at least one of the bases then until now. Here is another of these beautiful illustrated books, compilation of Justinian. Needless to say, they all had to be, well, obviously, done by hand, usually done by hand by probably non-monastic scribes, I would think. Someone asked that question in a Wednesday class, and I think that's probably what happened. This is for a university. Of course, universities are tied to the church at this point. So, but still. Now, this is a little placard from the Frisk exhibition, talking about the first and second styles, Bolognese manuscript nation. That they changed this point, and it mentions that Dante takes note of that. It says in Divine Comedy, Dante reflects this shift in taste, which is from a more, well, I don't know, I wouldn't say primitive, but less elaborate style to a more Byzantine kind of decorative style in manuscript illustration. And anyway, and we're going to hear this talk in Canto 10. It's going to meet one of the illustrators, this guy, Gabino, I guess, and basically illuminator guilty of the sin of pride. He says, "Oh, I cried out." That's Dante. Are you not, or Dicini, glory of Gabino, glory of that art they call illumination now in Paris. Brother, he said, pages painted by the brush of Franco Bolognese smiled more brightly. All the glory now is his, mine but apart. So, here, as we'll see in a few weeks, when we get to Canto 10, that this guy has the sin of pride, but he's learning. As now he says his pupil, so he mentions here, this Franco guy has exceeded him. So, anyhow, if you get a chance, as I say, it's not January 31st, go take a look at this. It's really very interesting. Well, now, we also, this particular passage that we're reading from the Canto 6, you see a mention of Albert. Now, this is Albert I, Austrian, uncrowned emperor, 10 years, 1298, 1308. That's about the time Dante's writing this, or thereabouts. Preceding the election of Henry VII. It's possible that Dante has in mind his punishment, Albert's blood, first the death of his firstborn son Rudolph, 1307, then he owned the next year. The image of Italy as an uncontrolled animal, which has been operative since Purgatorio 6, verse 89, now culminates the Sordello-like invictus against the Habsburg ruler. Habsburg, that's the ruling family, Albert I of Austria. He's in the Habsburg dynasty. Okay, now Dante denounces clerics' involvement in politics. Dante's mind, church needs to work as a balance of secular power. Church especially should understand this. All people in piety should yield that saddle unto Caesar, which is his, if you can understand what God revealed. This balance is destroyed to the detriment of society when the church becomes a secular power. That was certainly the problem in medieval Europe, particularly Italy. Church gets politicized and secularized by concerning itself so directly with the business of running a state. Our Lord seems to give similar advice to the Pharisees and Herodians. Then he said to them, render therefore to Caesar things that are Caesar's, God things that are God. So St. John Paul II reminds us of the same truth in the early 1980s. He ordered the priest Ernesto Cardinal to lead the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. And as I mentioned to the Wednesday group, he also ordered a U.S. congressman, federal congressman, a district in Massachusetts, who was a Jesuit and Catholic priest, give up his seat in Congress. This priest did. His name was Robert Drinan. This is also interesting. By Caesar, why will you not dwell with me? Rome, by extension, Holy Roman Empire as a whole, was suffering from a vacuum of imperial power in Dante's time. Church did not so much usurp the civic authority as a step into the gaping void. Dante sees part of the blame as falling on those who have the gifts to govern but decline the burden of the state. And really, that is something of the history of medieval Europe, starting with the essential collapse in 476, or even really before, of imperial power in the West. Someone had to do something, and it was often the church who was most competent and most competent. Shall we say, the prestige and ability to do it. And as time went on, the church took on issues that probably were best left to purely secular individuals. So anyway, it leaves room for the unqualified, the selfish, and ambitious, power hungry, all because the idea of true public service seems to have disappeared. Its concerns sound disturbingly modern. Elections can leave voters with discouraging thought. Is this really the best we can do? Now, it is very modern, is it not? This tells you we need to pray for our country, not just our country, but many, many others have an issue. As a result of this rule by the unfit and selfish, rule by whim rather than wise laws, governments are unstable, changing every few months. How many times in one man's memory we changed laws, coins, customs, offices, got yourself a brand new citizenry? Instability is destructive to human society, pursuit of our spiritual lives. Watching society being dragged in this direction, and that by various factions is painful. Our sense of common purpose and better principles seems a distant memory. I would say we need to have that common purpose, better principles, both just for our secular peace, but the idea that, as this author says, instability is destructive to human society, pursuit of our spiritual lives. Pursuit of our spiritual lives should be the main thing that we're after in this life. We'll continue. For you, sir, and your father and your greed, for the co-conquest of northern lands, have left the empire's garden to go to seed. He's saying that the German Habsburgs are more concerned about Germany than they are Italy, and that's actually True, number one. Number two is kind of what you would kind of expect if your seat of authority and power was Austria. Come see the Montagues and the Capulets, the Moneri and the Filippici, reckless man. Those ruined already, these who ruined Biceps. Montagues and Capulets, you may remember that, Romeo and Juliet, and that is where Shakespeare gets it. Come, cruel emperor. Not necessarily, by the way, Dante's poem for this history here. Come, cruel emperor, he's talking about Albert. Come and see your lords hunted and home. Come tend their wounds and see what fine security sent them up to Florence. Come see your stricken Rome that weeps alone, widowed and miserable, day and night, little Caesar lied. Where are you going? Come, see your people everywhere the same, united in love. And if no pity for us can move you, come and blush for your good name. O supreme Jove, mankind crucified. If you permit the question, I must ask it. Eyes of clear justice turned aside? Or is this the unfolding of a plan shaped your fathomless counsel towards some good beyond all reckoning of mortal man? For the land is a tyrant's roost. Any clod who comes along playing the partisan passes for Marcellus. Dante was a supporter of a united Italy. You remember. So he asked, My Caesar, why do you not keep her? Doing so, he echoes Christ, falling in despair from the cross. God, my God, why have you abandoned me? Then Dante uh, goes into a full tirade. Dante ventures further. The emperor alone is not to blame. Dante dares to question whether or not God is any longer paying attention to his Roman citizens. As Christ, perhaps like the Father before him, in the case of Jerusalem, Babylonian captivity, turned away from his people. For each Italian city overflows with tyrants, and every clown plays a partisan thinks he is the new Marcellus. Marcellus being a Roman rebel for the common people. In fact, Dante reminds us of those found in the book of Lamentations, the only book of the Bible that consists entirely and solely of text. Florence. By Florence. Now he turns to Florence, right? May you not resent the fact that my digression has not touched you, thanks to your people's sober management. Others have justice at heart, a bow strung by careful counsels, not quickly drawn. Yours shaped words forever from the tongue. Others offered public office, shun the cares of service. Yours cry out unasked. I'll take it on. I'm the one. Rejoice, I say, that your great gifts endure, your wealth, your peacefulness, your good sense. By truth I speak, facts are not obscure. Athens and Sparta, when of old they drew the codes of law to civilize the world, they years hence compared man's and thy hence. All the time shall remember the subtlety which the thread you spin in mid-October breaks for them. Now, let's go back to Lamentations here. Lamentations owns the horrors of the Babylonian seizure of Judea, destruction of Jerusalem. Book's recital of the tragedies is in one woven fabric, poetic wrestling with the ways of God, as well as description of his method of dealing with wayward people. Dante sees many parallels with Judea's fate, edition of his beloved Italy. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow she is, who once was great among the nations. She, was queen among the provinces and now become a slave. Bitterly she weeps at night. Tears are upon her cheeks. Among all her lovers, there's none to comfort her. All her friends have betrayed her. They become her enemies. After affliction and hard labor, Judah has gone in exile. She dwells among the nations. She finds no resting place. All pursue her, overtaking her in her distress. What have the Italian Christians done to be treated so? One suspects that Dante is treading a very fine line here. He is approaching blasphemy. These passages show how, the nadir of his political despair, similar in some ways to that of Machiavelli some centuries later, Dante questions even God. He knows that Italy has been invaded by Caesar, that would be Emperor Albert the Seventh. Why, why also by divine providence? Indeed, it's a message here for our time. That is something to think about. Now we continue and conclude. How often, in living recollection, have you changed coinage, custom, or office? Act own limbs off and sew them on. If your wits and memory are not dead, you will yet see yourself as that sick woman who cannot rest, though on a feather bed, flails if she fenced Florence. Your cure, of course. Now here's Hollander's commentary. God's plan for Italy, in any case, rises from his divine counsel, which is beyond our knowledge. See Psalm 35, verse 7. Judgments are likely to be. Now, the stuff about Florence is obviously sarcastic. The obvious sarcasm preceding seven terces and praise of Florence now yields a devastating image. The city as a wealthy and good wife, which is perhaps derived from Augustine's Confessions. As Augustine nears conversion at the very end of the sixth book, soul still struggles to escape from God. Be free, better things. Describes its inner state as follows. Whichever way to turn, front, back, or sides, made that was hard, for in Psalm. Now I conclude with this opportunity to get this Salvador Dali artist proof. And look at this. Well, first of all, here's the website. You can get it right here. And this is a proof circa 1960. And this is this Canto, okay? Canto 6. And notice there, the praise value is 150K. You can get it for 49K. And all you have to do is go on the site and add to the cart and buy it now and have it. And I'm surely one of you will do that, right? Know that. Okay. Well, we will see you next time.